Well. Today we are going to talk about an antidote, which is over 2,000 years old, to a modern problem: artificial intelligence. But let's go back 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, when the Roman Empire began to conquer the rest of Europe, the booty didn't just include gold and silver and precious jewels. It also included people, slaves. And having so many slaves at their disposal, the Roman ruling classes, the patricians, no longer needed the labour of the plebeians. And as a general came back through Spain into Italy, he noticed that the plebeians, the Roman citizens, were living on the edges of huge estates which were owned by patricians, which were managed by slaves. So the Roman Empire, the Roman ruling classes, came to the conclusion that it's better to employ people you don't pay than actually employ the plebeians, the majority of the Roman citizens. Now this caused a lot of dissension and revolt amongst plebeians, and in order to take off the lid off the rebellion, the Roman ruling classes, the patricians, needed to work out a mechanism via which to maintain order as well as benefit from the increasing number of slaves, free labour, that the expansion of the Roman Empire was creating. And this is where the term bread and circuses originated. They realised that if they provided the basic necessities, shelter and food, that they could put a lid on the rebellions which were occurring amongst the plebeians. But at the same time, they understood that you just don't need bread to survive, you also need entertainment. And by the 1st century AD, Roman citizens, plebeians, were entitled to almost 240 public holidays out of 365 days. So here we have the age-old dilemma. What do you do with people when you no longer need them to produce products? You no longer need them to manage things. You no longer need them to maintain security. And this is the situation we find ourselves in the 21st century. A very similar situation to what the Roman Empire faced 2,000 years ago. And that is with the march of artificial intelligence and the manipulation and the ownership of artificial intelligence by a shrinking number of individuals and corporations. And with 8 billion people on the planet, we have now moved from an industrial age to a digital age where the wage system is no longer a mechanism via which people are controlled. because the wage system is becoming increasingly irrelevant, because the creation of digital platforms and the marriage of digital platforms with artificial intelligence and the robotic revolution, which is just around the corner, means that we no longer need we will no longer need in the near future significant number of people to create profits for a shrinking minority. So that shrinking minority is faced with a dilemma. What do you do with an increasing number of people who are no longer part of the wage system, who rely on social security benefits to survive in this country? What do you do? Now, our friends up in the trees are telling us that you're onto something here, Joe. They're telling us that what we need is a new system. A new system. A new system of production. A new system of, more importantly, the way you distribute wealth in the community. That's correct. A new system of distributing wealth in the community. Not a new system of production, because that new system of production will come whether we want it or not. And that's what we saw with the increasing number of slaves in the Roman Empire. But those who exercise power need to create a mechanism via which they can actually suppress potential revolts which will endanger their manipulation and control of the system. And that's the dilemma we face. It's a critical dilemma. This is where the concept of a universal basic income comes in. Now, there has been discussion recently about a universal basic income, but what is a universal basic income? A universal basic income is different to a social security system where society attempts to maintain security by providing for the very basic necessities of people who cannot take part in the wage system because they're elderly, or they're sick, or they have a disability, or they have responsibilities as far as children are concerned. A universal basic income is a mechanism of sharing the wealth, which to a significant degree is based on decreasing profitability for corporations. A universal basic income is given to everyone, irrespective of what they earn. Although this may seem counterproductive, that a universal basic income goes to an individual with no assets, and at the same time the same universal basic income goes to a billionaire. The fact is that if it goes to everyone, we can liberate hundreds of thousands of public servants from the tedious task of determining who and who isn't eligible to a social security benefit. We're seeing that already with the increasing introduction of artificial intelligence, not just in corporations who try to maximise profits, but also in government departments and entities. So a universal basic income is not just about providing the basic necessities. It's about allowing people to live a life that is both productive and, more importantly, allows them to determine whether they want to be part or not of the wage system. Because although a universal basic income goes to somebody is equal for everyone in the community, the fact is that through the taxation system, the universal basic income that goes to a billionaire goes back to the common pool, while universal basic income, which goes to somebody with no assets, finds themselves in a situation where they keep that universal basic income. At the same time, we need a legislative agenda which ensures that a universal basic income doesn't create inflationary pressures which are then exploited by corporations and individuals to maximise their profits by rorting the system. So there is nothing revolutionary or radical about a universal basic income. I mean, when you have populations that are no longer needed in terms of production, if society wants to be stable, then you need a mechanism, as the Romans had, bread and circuses, in order to maintain order. So it's nothing new. But the fact is that currently we are all somehow enmeshed in the wage system. And the fact that we're all part of the wage system and that mechanism via which we derive our income is going to radically change, means that radical changes are required, not just in terms of productive forces, which we'll see with the increasing use of artificial intelligence, but radical changes in terms of taxation, so that we find that the commonwealth is used for the common good. As I've said consistently on these YouTube presentations of public interest before corporate interests, the fact is that democracy is based on the concept of creating the greatest good for the greatest number. And it's no accident that in 2024, with the increasing use of artificial intelligence to maintain security, that we are seeing more and more dictatorial elements appearing in societies around the world. It's no accident that is happening, because as those who own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication feel the pressures of increasing. So, what can we do? We can maintain the status quo and see the gradual introduction of a very basic universal, very basic increasing pension payments for an increasing number of people who will find themselves unemployed, and the state will then have to increase security in order to maintain order, and we may see what's left of the parliamentary system disappear and replaced with a much more authoritarian system where human beings are basically disposable commodities who aren't that essential for society. On the other hand, if we begin that struggle to introduce a universal basic income which is based on the division of the commonwealth in a more egalitarian manner, so that the billionaires and the millionaires of the world disappear, then we will be able to enjoy the fruits of artificial intelligence as a community. The fact is that as far as the Roman Empire was concerned, the plebeians continued to live a relatively stable, basic existence. They never were able to challenge the power of the autocratic state which emerged as a republic turned into an empire. And we are faced with the same dilemma. It's not just about gathering the crumbs that are pushed off the corporate table in order to create a minuscule universal basic income that just basically, feeds us and shelters us. But it's much, much more. It's about creating a society where each and every one of us can use that universal basic income to develop ourselves to our fullest potential, free of the economic forces, free of the economic pressures that we face today because we live in a private investment for private profit society, where a shrinking number of people, through policies which have promoted deregulation, privatisation, globalisation and corporatisation, have basically concentrated wealth and, more importantly, power in fewer and fewer hands. So we are at the beginning of a new era. We are not just passive dolls that can be pushed around and be given the basic to survive. We are human beings. Society is not about worshipping a dictator or an elected prime minister or a celebrity or some corporate megalomaniac. Societies come together to ensure that the greatest good occurs for the greatest number. So I don't see artificial intelligence as a threat. I see artificial intelligence as a mechanism of liberating us, not just from wage slavery, not just from economic pressures which are based on the creation of ever-increasing profits for a shrinking minority, but as a mechanism via which we can have our cake and eat it, where we can have both bread and circuses and live in a stable, secure community. There is an antidote to artificial intelligence, and it is based on the concept of a universal basic income. How that is introduced is the question that we face as a people and, more importantly, as a civilization.